Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and in today's video what we're going to be doing is this right here. So if that looks interesting to you guys, please carry on and watch the video. And also one more thing before we get into the video, if you enjoy what I do here, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. It really helps me out and lets me know you enjoy the video. But with all that out of the way, let's get into that video.
Okay, so we're going to be painting up 3 members of Chaos here. So what I'm going to do, rather than show you each one individually, what I'm going to do is paint up and switch out the models that are on camera for when it's relevant for the technique or the area that I'm trying to paint is, needed on screen, rather than me trying to paint up 3 one after the other and making the video a lot longer than it needs to be. I'd rather just pick the areas where there is some overlap and feature the model that needs the most of that, so you can get a good idea of what I'm doing here. And as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm painting the skin. So this is of course going to be for all 3 models, and I'm going to give them a darker skin tone. I'm going to try improve on some of my darker skin tone here, and I think this is a great color to go with them, since they're going to be all these nice deep colors, and I want to try and keep that theme along and give it something a little bit different here. So coming in with a nice dark skin tone, of course, and giving everywhere a base coat, making sure that we keep our paints thin, and we're going for 2 smooth coats. Then now we have that base coat down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come with a reddish skin tone now, and this is going to be for the highlighted area. So these models are nice and well sculpted with detail. This one here especially well sculpted with details. It's got these big rippling muscles, so we've got a lot to work with here in terms of giving everywhere a highlight. So I'm going to be pretty much focusing everywhere where these muscles are, of course, hitting the sun, but of course where they're nicely sculpted in too. I'm going for, rather than trying to just highlight the ones that would be naturally in the sun, I'm going for like an all over highlight. I want to try and just emphasize the muscles a lot more on this guy, especially. The other ones I'm going to be a little bit more like picking the ones that are easy to get to, that would be where the sun's hitting. But this guy here's got big massive rippling muscles, and I want to emphasize the sculpt there, so I'm going to go around and pick out sort of every individual one that I can see that's nicely defined and sculpted there. And of course, since we're using the reddish flesh tone, it's going to give us a nice pop of color as well. Then once we have the highlighting step completed, what we're going to do is we're going to come in with a wash now. For me, I'm going to be using a Brightland Flesh shade here with a flesh colored wash with sort of a reddy tint to it, so it's going to really work off the red tones for the highlights that we're using here. Now what I'm doing here is applying the wash last, because what I'm doing is basically making it so the transition between our base color and our highlight is sort of like a smoother transition when applying the wash over top. By all means, you could do it the opposite way around, where you place the base coat, wash and then highlight, but I've just been finding that it leaves too stark a contrast for me, and I like it just a little bit blended in together. So instead I place the wash over the highlights instead, and it just smooths out those transitions and makes it look a little bit more professional in my eyes, and just sort of blends them in together and doesn't make everything such a stark contrast in color. But totally up to you with what you want to do here. Then once we have all of the skin completed, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to the armor. So for this, I'm going to make his armor, and for all these guys I'm going to make the armor red. So coming in with dragon red here, this is quite a bright, vibrant red, but we're going to apply some washes and stuff to it to darken it down a little bit. But since they're members of Chaos and they're sort of like not worried about trying to be stealthy or anything like that, I wanted them to sort of just pop out on the battlefield a little bit more. So that's why I'm going with a brighter red than I probably would normally do. I'd probably darken it and then highlight it up, but I want to go with a bit brighter red for this to show off they're not afraid of anything here as they're fighting on the battlefield. So giving everywhere a nice good overall covering. And for like how we have this like shaman wizard guy here as well, I also want to be picking up the cape and like the loincloth. So anywhere that there's clothing as well, I'm also going to be picking out in the red too, to just make it all one cohesive color, but totally up to you here. Then once we have all the armor on our guys painted up, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with actually a red wash rather than applying a black or a brown wash here. Now you could totally do that. A black wash of course would darken everything down a lot more, and give everything sort of like a grimmer appearance. If you applied a brown wash to it, give it sort of like a dirty effect. But I just want to enhance that red. It's also going to have the benefit of darkening it down as well, because the red of the wash is a lot darker than the actual red we're using here. So it's going to nicely darken everything down, but also just enhance the richness of the reds on there as well. So nice and easy step to do here, but of course we want to avoid anywhere that we've painted up so far. So that is of course the skin here too. So be careful as you're applying the wash, and don't forget to soak up any if it's starting to pull in areas you don't want it to. Then once we have that wash completely dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with some black grey. This isn't pure black, it's just a little bit lighter than pure black, because I want somewhere to go when applying a wash over it later on. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to use this for anywhere that they have any underclothing or any belts and straps on them, just giving all those areas nice black, and that's going to work nicely with the chaos sort of style, and also just keeping everything that sort of dark grimy sort of color. So going in with a nice grey black here, it's just going to be super simple, but you could easily go with a brown here as well, just totally up to you what to do here. But myself, I'm just going for basically a very dark grey. Then once we have those straps and belts picked out, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with some skeleton bone, and this is going to be used for all of the bone areas. So another big feature with all the group of models here is they're all covered in bone on them. They're sort of like using them as like an exoskeleton, but also this nice intimidating like armor on there. So we want to pick them out using skeleton bone, as the name implies. It's going to be great sort of bone color, and also to work with all these horns. So there's a lot to pick out on all of these models. I've all got them all twisting throughout their bodies as well. So don't be afraid to slow down, switch to a thinner brush if you need to really get into all of the cracks and crevices, so you can give all of the bone and horned areas a nice good covering. As well as that too, don't forget all the little skulls on the models. All of the models have little skulls all over the place, so don't forget about those too. Then once we have all of our boned and horned areas picked out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with some brown. This here's just a nice leather brown, a nice neutral brown. And I'm just going to be painting up the staves and the handles of all the weapons that these guys here are using. And this is exactly why I didn't want to use brown for our leather straps and belts on there, because I knew I was going to paint in the staves and the handles with this, so I didn't want them to be the exact same color, so that's why I was doing the black there. So nice easy step here. Then once we have all of that complete, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with a red copper. Now this is totally up to you color. I know a lot of common colors for chaos is gold trim, but for me I felt like copper was sort of calling out to me a little bit more. And what I'm going to be doing is the very arduous and precise task of picking out all of the trim on these guys' armor. Now Chaos and Warhammer, of course, known for their crazy amount of elaborate trim on armor and taking a long time. So one thing to sort of just keep your mind on it and be patient. Make sure you only have a small amount of paint on your brushes. You don't want to be globbing everywhere, because there's such fine and intricate trim over the entire thing. You're definitely better off having a little less on your paintbrush than you think, and going over it again with a second layer if you need to. I know it's going to be long and tedious, but it's going to make it end up looking a lot better by the end of it. And as you can see, I've switched to a nice finer point brush, so I can really get into all those cracks and crevices and where all the trim is sort of leading around, that I can get to with a nice fine point, so I can really make sure I get all of that trim. But for you, you may want to do it with gold. I think it's sort of the classic trim color for chaos, but for me I was feeling copper, as it had a nice red tint to it, so it was working well with the armor as well. Then once we have done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with some Nuln oil. This is a black wash, and I want to be applying a wash to all of that area we did in trim. One thing I also forgot to mention too is, while I was doing the trim, I also did the other metallic details in your silver. Now there wasn't too much on these guys. A couple of them have a chain, and some of them have a axe or a hammer on them, so I just painted that there. I didn't think that was too much of a step to worry about showing you, as the more important thing was getting that trim done with the metallics rather than the edge of the weapon blades and stuff like that. So just be aware that I came in with a gunmetal color there to do those parts as well. Then once we have that complete, what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be coming in with a contrast paint, and for me I'm going to be using Skeleton Horde here. Now you could also use a sepia wash to do this as well. I thought I would use Skeleton Horde as, you know, contrast paint is a little bit more of a paint, and it was going to give me a little bit more variety in the colors itself in terms of applying it and giving a lot more sort of uniqueness in the way it's going to dry. So one thing I'm not going to actually worry too much about doing with this is applying it over like super neatly. I'm sort of going to be like really haphazard with it and really rough. I want to have some patches of dark spots, light spots, maybe a couple of streaks in there to show that these horns and skeleton bones are really like old and worn out and they use them a lot. That's my theory behind it anyway. Whether it comes out like that, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's why I went with the contrast paint here rather than the wash, because the wash is going to go straight for the recesses and stuff like that. Contrast paint is going to stick a little bit more to the surface and give us a little bit more interesting texture on the nice big areas we have with the bone and the horn. So just keeping that in mind when you're painting these up if you are. Then once we have that contrast paint completely dry, what I'm going to do is come in with our original skeleton bone color, and I'm just going to come around and pick out some areas for the highlights. So these are the areas where all of the bones have sort of like a natural ridge on them, where the points are naturally popping out, and some areas where of course it's sort of naturally hitting the sun, gives us a nice angles of areas to be highlighted. So giving everywhere a nice skim with the side of my brush to do this, to really pick out a lot of those areas in the bone. This is really going to hopefully make it pop with that contrast paint applied there too, and give them something really awesome unique to do. But with all that, I think we're done and finished. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what they all came out like in the end. And there you have it. With all that complete, we have finally finished painting up the Gorechosen of Dromm from the Warhammer line of miniatures from Games Workshop. So I hope this video has been helpful for you guys, whether you want to follow along with what I did here, or you just want to use the video as some inspiration in painting up your own miniatures. But with all that said, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next video.